Hello, I'm Jennifer of Jen and Coco. I hope y'all are having a wonderful day today. I know it's been a moment since I've been on. I had to deal with some personal things, but we're back now, and we're going to be talking about familial names. So, I hope you have your mugs of hot chocolate ready, because we're going to be diving right on in. Now, so we've been establishing, for the past couple weeks, we've been working a lot on word building, particularly, and I kind of want to take a step back from that, because I realized that as we've been word building, as we've been creating words, coining terms, coining morphemes, there we are, that's the one. As we've been coining morphemes, I've realized that I've been running into a wall of what sort of when I need to coin a term, of trying to figure out what sort of term I need to create. And I realized that part of that is just because I don't have as much of the world built as I would like. In order to be able to effectively create the words and understand why certain words would be used in certain places. And while some of my world building is determined by, at least my own creative process is determined by the coining of morphemes. Like there's a little bit of play in both directions. I do want to make a firmer form of the world. So we're going to be looking a little more at actual world building these upcoming weeks. Today we're going to start working on just a little bit of combination of both, but looking into what are considered like familial names and personal names, and how do those get used on a day-to-day basis. So I have some ideas there, but I think we're actually going to start formalizing like the shape of the world, some of its history prior to our Flaunal creatures, getting some ideas of other creatures that can exist. I also have some ideas. I've mentioned before that I think this might be an interdimensional Earth of some sorts, and I have an idea that I think we're going to run with, and we'll talk about that once we start actually like physically building the world. And we'll go into that in probably in this next episode. Our next episode will likely be us actually starting to design our physical world, getting into how it looks, its geography and that sort of stuff, figuring out where our Flaunal civilization is starting in this world, and yeah. So I'm very excited for this. We've got a lot to look forward to this week, so let's dive on in. Now, I had a brain blast the other day. I've been playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3 recently. Trust me, this is relevant to the story. And I've been playing in Welsh areas, and I have done a little bit of looking into. I've been playing as Welsh characters a lot, and I've done a little bit of looking in my own thing into how like Welsh and Old English names worked. And this was prior to this. And I always found it interesting of the like son of blank, daughter of blank, and those sort of last names as they were, where you don't have a family name per se, you have a name that is essentially your relation to a specific person. And I really like that idea. I like that to an extent, names are fairly unique to specific relations, and I think that fits in a lot with what we've established so far about our society and our family system. You are a member of the house of this person's eldest line. So I think there's really going to be, like 2 or 3 familial names that are not your own personal name that we're going to really be emphasizing. So let's find let's just go all the way down to the bottom here. Okay. Personal names. So, we're starting with more of the familial names, so I'm thinking a 3-name system is likely here. And bear with me on this. I realize this is slightly complex for the sort of culture we have, but I think it makes sense. So, I'm thinking, look, and order is not determined yet. I don't know what the order is going to be, whether it's going to be like last name, or family name first, or personal name first. We'll come to that later. But the 3 names we're definitely going to have, or we're likely to have. We're going to have a personal name, so the name that you are personally recognized as. So personal name. We're going to have Alright, so personal name, we're going to have a name for our You're going to have a name that ties you to whoever your head of household is. I don't know if it's going to be like your current head of household, or if that's just going to say, this is the household I belong to, everyone in this household has this same name. Essentially, I don't know whether it's a family name, like a static family name that does not change, or I don't know if it is a semi-dynamic name that might change as the head of household changes. I think a static name makes more sense. I don't know of any names in reality that are dynamic. I don't even know, like, I'm not certain that that's a actual thing. It'd be something to consider. Well, actually, we'll come back to that one, but essentially we'll have, like, head of, so let's see, household head of, and then the third name, and this one is I'm going to say semi-static here, and I have a reason for saying that. But this is going to be the potential head of household for your generation. So, let's say, so this is going to be yeah, head of household for your generation. So, what this means, so you have a personal name, something like Jennifer, per se, although not, because most of the syllable, or most of the consonants in Jennifer, you can't say, actually, none of the consonants in Jennifer are legal consonants in our language. We have not yet given our language a name yet, but that'll come in time, not too worried about that. Yeah. Personal name, head of household, and then the head of household, or personal name, family name, and then the name for your generation, essentially. And the reason for all of these, the personal name, I mean, that's just your personal identifier, period. That works easily. The household or head of household, that essentially says, these are the person I belong to. These are essentially my representatives on the council. These are the people that, and anyone who shares this last name has a blood relation to me. And then the last one is the head of household for your generation. That says, this is my generation, or this is the generation level I am, which helps keep track of, I mean, to a certain extent, it helps keep track of how everyone is related to a certain extent. But also, it kind of, it provides some interesting, or some levels of, like, orderliness of saying, like, this is who I'm related to. This is, because that's what something that is important is who you're related to within your own family, and how you're related to them. Particularly, like, who is the eldest child of the eldest child of the eldest child in your family line, or in your generation. So, okay. So, carrying on with this, we have personal name, head of household stuff, generational stuff. What shall we look into next? Let's see. So personal names, I haven't decided on, like, how we're going to come up with personal names, whether they're going to be, like, value terms, such like grace, there's a different term besides value term, but, virtues, there we are, like whether they're going to be virtue terms, or natural phenomena, or something like that. We have a lot of options there. I kind of find those interesting. Especially when their names are, especially when meanings are fairly transparent in personal names. I kind of find that interesting. And we're at a point, right now, as we were saying, this is like an earlier language, I kind of want there to be transparent meanings, and those can get obscured over time as our language ages and evolves and changes. So we got some ideas there. As we mentioned, we have our head of household title. So, yeah, the question is this going to be like the founder of the household, like the original member, or is it going to strictly be whoever is the current head? Essentially, whoever is your council representative. If it is strictly the head of household, then that would mean, if it's strictly your head of household, that'd mean that name would change over time, for better or for worse. Oh, the other thing I hadn't talked about is that we're also mainly looking at Flaunal creatures right now. Because I do think that there will be some dynamic... Oh, actually, hold up a second. This reminds me of something else. We'll cut back to that in a moment. Let me finish my first thought. There will be some changing of names when a avian creature moves into a new household through marriage. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. However, going back... Okay, yes. Now that I think about it, names... We do have an example of name changes. I mean, there's a legal process for it in the U.S., but more specifically, maiden names are a specific version of names changing. However, that is, typically speaking, a one-time change, an intentional change, not one that just happens. Okay. But, hear me out on this. Imagine the dramatic effect of cops coming up to your door late in the evening and addressing you with a different last name because that's how they're saying your current head of household has just passed away. I think for that sole reason, I think I want these names to change and represent who the current head of household is. That also means that you're really caring about who is currently alive, you're not... Or yeah, that these creatures care more about who is currently alive than rather than ancestor worship per se. Yeah. Okay. So we have personal name, head of household stuff, head of household for the generation, personal name, head of household. Okay, and then this would also be your maiden name. This would change when you marry off to your head of household 1, because that's no longer your head of household. However, your head of household for your generation, that's going to stay the same. That is going to say, this is a generation I was born into. Yeah, okay, I like this a lot. So, personal names. Yeah, so yeah, the order of names, this is where we get into an interesting question. Yeah, I haven't thought too much about where I want the names to be, because we have three rules. We have 3 different names. 2 that are static and unchanging, and 1 that is likely to change, and will likely change multiple times throughout your lifetime. So, let's see, personal name, head of household. I kind of want the personal name to be on one of the extremities of the name. However, I'm not certain that that is, and here's my reasoning for this. There is no reason. I kind of want it to be on one of the extremities, because I think that gives it a place of prominence in a way. However, if our personal name is to go last... Actually, let me put it this way. I think personal name should be at one of the extremities. I think head of household for your generation should not be first. So you would have personal name, head of house. So, yeah, the head of household for your generation should not be first. While it is an important name, it is not. It's really not the most important piece of information here. It is more there because the people who want it to be there are important people in your society. So in that case, I think I see. So here's the ways I see it currently. I see the names being. I either see. Here, well, let's get these. So potential options for this would be personal name, head of household for generation. That's option one. Let's also just do this. Next option, because I kind of also want the personal name and the head of household name to be near each other. So head of household, personal name, head of household for generation. That one I really like, except for the fact that the personal name's not at the extremity. So the other version of that would be head of household, generational head of household, personal name. And then, well, we only have one other option if we're not going to put our generational head of household first. Which, yes, I think that's a hard and fast rule. The generational head of household is not. It will not be your first name. So it's one of these three options. I don't like three, I'll be honest. I like the head of household and the personal name being near each other. I kind of like the head of household being the first thing, which means that two is our most likely option, but even though it doesn't put our personal name first. However, it might be that people, if they're saying names, unless they need to be full three-name name, it's likely that they'll mostly just go by their first two more than their last one. Or the last one might particularly be used to clarify between two people. This also means that, or this particular name in particular, means that people across different generations will have an easier time having the same name, because even though their head of household name will be the same and their personal name will be the same, so long as they're born into different generations, this third name will differentiate who they are. So yeah, I think I like this. Ooh! Okay, something I hadn't thought about. I know I've mentioned before the potential for people starting their own, or start a new household. Essentially, branch away from your old household and start your own new thing. What would be interesting is the fact that you would know when someone has done that, because while their head of household name and their personal name would be the same, because they're now their own head of household, and that is their name, their generational head of household would be different. Whereas for an actual head of household, for a current head of household, all three names should be the same. You would essentially go to a mononym at that point. And for that fact of generational heads of household will not really have this second name. I will either not have a personal, I will not have this third name, or it will probably have this whatever marker that differentiate from a personal name. It might have that on there. So there's some ideas there. Okay. Yeah, I think option 2 is going to be our order here. Because I really like the idea of having that head of household being... Okay, so... let's do this. Let's reorder this around. Okay, so, order would be current head of household, current head of households, household name, personal name, and then generational potential head of household name. Okay, I like this a lot. So, transparent meaning. Yeah, well, that's one thing we'll need to figure out is, like, where are personal names coming from? There's a lot of cool options when it comes to creating names. I want to do something with meaning to it. So, well, I mean, it's something that I want to look more into. So yeah, transparent meaning. Important note. If, for whatever reason, you are born, in the unlikely event that you are born before your generational head of household, there's probably going to be just a placeholder name there to say that, hey, I belong to a generation that doesn't have a potential head of household yet. Haha. I don't think that it's not going to be a likely scenario, but it is, at least initially speaking, it is one that could become increasingly likely once one person does have that. But because essentially the head of household belongs to the eldest born of the eldest born, which means most likely they're going to be, because their parents reached maturity before any of their siblings, and their as did their parents' parents and all that, you're going to get essentially a skewed thing where you have, here, let's do this. When you have, let's say, you're the eldest born of the eldest born of the eldest born versus the youngest born of the youngest born of the youngest born, and this is like the earliest in the timeline and the latest in the timeline. So you're kind of going to start seeing that skew, and it'll get greater and greater and it could get greater and greater as time goes on and families expand and all that. So, and like, of course, it's not going to be a straight line like that, but that is definitely going to be the trend. That said, there are plenty of reasons why someone may be born, why someone may be born before their potential head of household. Actually, one very likely reason is that if the eldest of the eldest gives birth to avian creatures but not a flaunal creature first, those avian creatures are likely to have a placeholder name until they have a sibling born. Like I said, it's not a likely scenario, but it's definitely a scenario. It's not a common scenario, but it's one that is definitely. It happens. It's not unheard of. It is. But it is definitely a specific case scenario. But yeah. So that's the one thing we have personal names already with names here. So yeah, it will also be interesting because that means council members will essentially have one name, or will most likely have one name, two names tops, because they might potentially have a different generational head of household name. So yeah, I like this a lot. Okay. Yeah, this provides a lot of interesting options. I'm quite happy with this. I think we're going to call it here today, keep it short. That said, come Wednesday, look forward to some actual physical world building. I plan on breaking out some of my very limited artistic abilities and creating this, or starting to create the world. So look forward to that. I certainly am, and I hope you'll have a wonderful rest of your day. Feel free to send questions, comments my way. I am always happy to answer them. And thank you so much. Hope you'll have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.